Well, hey there. Welcome to the City Light U podcast. Thanks for watching. City Light U is the college ministry of City Light Lincoln Church, and we meet every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. We're a community of college students and young adults coming together to meet Jesus and become transformed by his gospel. We hope you join us.
Welcome to City Light U. Like Andrew said, I'm Mercades, and I'm really pumped to share with you guys tonight. There's a lot of you, by the way. That's a lot. I'm like, ooh. But, yeah, I guess I'm like the first chick they've had speak at City Light U, so finally you guys can learn some truth, right? Like, no, I'm just kidding. I'm like super thankful to be here to share with you guys, and this is a picture. I think they have it. Yeah, that's me and my husband. Woohoo, yeah. So we've been married for about a year and a half, so clearly I'm a pro at this wife stuff, so that's why they asked me to share. Just a little background for you guys before we get started. I heard the gospel and became a follower of Christ when I was 21, and I was at UNL in college. I was in a girls' Bible study, and I was freshly walking with the Lord. So they read this verse that we're going to talk about tonight, wives submit. And I was like, oh no, Lord, like, these chicks, this is not my crew. These are my ladies. Like, I just learned that I needed to submit to the Lord as the ruler of my life. And now I'm supposed to one day submit to a sinful man. So, you see, I was raised in Oklahoma in a trailer park by a single mom. And I am not kidding. This is what she used to do with me. So she would have me stand my little 8-year-old self in front of a mirror, and she would have me say, and my maiden name is Price, okay? So she would have me say, I'm Mercedes Mother Price, and ain't nobody gonna tell me what to do. I'm not even playing. Like, that is the advice that I got. So you can see where I'm coming from a little bit. I was certainly not trying to be a wife to submitting to nobody. And I thought, certainly, like, there was a typo in God's holy and perfect word, right? So I've struggled with this text and this principle that God has given me to be a wife. And I'm pretty sure that this isn't just something that I struggle with. I think a lot of us struggle with this. Maybe you've seen this word submit, and you've seen it abused. Maybe you haven't really seen it at all. Or maybe it's just something you have seen women despise. We really have not seen the biblical view of marriage lived out properly. I don't care if you grew up in a Christian home or not, it is hard to do well. And our culture is failing in it. And they are selling us their failure as truth. And I know this to be true because I wanted to just look at some of the lyrics right now from some of the famous women singer rappers, okay? So this is just the chicks, okay? So this is, if you know this, I like this song. I do like this song. But she says, I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it. I'm wearing a ring, but that don't mean I'm a Mrs. Whoever said money can't solve your problems must not have had enough money to solve them. I definitely do not have enough money to solve my problems. So she's not trying to be a Mrs. And then this is another one. It says, yeah, I got boy problems. That's the human in me. Bling, bling. And then I solve them. That's the goddess in me. You go to have a bad chick, non-committal. So I guess to be a bad chick, you're non-committal. So anyway, these are just like women talking about their view of this whole submit thing and women's power, It's like really interesting. One of the titles of one of those songs is called Truth Hurts, but the only thing that hurts me is that there's no truth in that song. Like, ugh. So, to be honest, I looked up the lyrics from the dudes right now, some of the rappers, Travis Scott, I know some of these people, I like it, but I hate it because I can't even tell you, like, their lyrics, because that's how bad it is, the thing that they call like women, me, like they're like the words they call me. I'm like, I'm not that. So anyway, I couldn't even like read those to you guys. So go look them up and then pray. I don't know. But like it's bad. But it's catchy, But anyway, just Anzi Minio, just keep him. He got it. He's got a good beat and good truth. So anyway, but here's what I want us to get tonight, okay? So though men and women in our culture have distorted the role of woman and man in marriage, and they've failed miserably, God's word has not, okay? God has given us the perfect design for marriage. And my hope and my prayer tonight is that you guys would see that clearly understood as this beautiful design for a woman's role. And that you would know, deep in your heart, you would know that it's so much better than the lies the culture has sold us. It's so much better. I pray that women, you would know your role and you would know your value, and that you would not settle for less than the man that you'll be called to submit to in marriage, right? And men, oh man, my hope and prayer for you is that you have the humility to be taught by a woman on this subject tonight. So Bob Walls is an elder in our church. He told me to tell you dudes this. This is for you guys, a little free one from our elder. He said, if you can't be taught by a woman, don't get married. Cool? So I hope, that's why, I'm just helping, I want to give him credit. So I hope that you would see God's role for women in marriage, and that you would desire to continue growing into the godly man that's worthy of such a wife. So we're going to hop in straight up. Let's go to this. Ephesians 5:22. 24. So I'm going to hop into verse 22. It says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. And I was thinking about this whole thing with submission, and I was like, man, is there any area in our culture where we see submission, we like it, and it's done pretty well? And so I want you guys to tell me one collegiate basketball team or NFL team where there isn't submission in their success. It's not just, I'm not talking about just any team, not the crappy ones, let's get them out. So where there isn't submission in their success, okay? So every player on the team, okay, has to submit to the coach and to one another. And, they'll have individual roles to play, but they have to submit to each other in order to play well. Never in the middle of like an NCAA tournament would you see like someone be like, oh, stop, dude, like you didn't even pass the ball to me, dude, like you passed it to him, like you didn't pass it to me. Like that would be like so absurd, like kind of fun to watch, but like so nuts. So, and I think the reason is because they have the same goal. They're working for the same thing. It's not just about them, the good ones, okay? In fact, there's like 70,000 plus people cheering that they'll submit to one another for the ultimate goal, right, to win the game. And so, does that word submit devalue a player? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And in the same way, it's not devaluing to submit to one another in marriage. So it's just interesting that I'm like all for submission during the game for sports, but then I bring this funk with it into marriage. So my first point for you guys is she must be a woman devoted to Christ. So I first just wanted to find like what submission is and what it is not. And to do that, I think we have to kind of back it up and see where Paul's coming from before we get to verse 22. So I'm not going to read it. You guys have Bible. So 19 to 20, verses 19 to 21. So Paul is describing what it looks like to have a life filled with the Spirit. And he says, a Spirit-filled life is shown by 5 things. 1, speaking to one another, singing to God, making music to the Lord, giving thanks to the Lord. And the 5th one, submitting to one another. So we're going to focus on the 5th one that Paul tells us right before he tells wives what's up. So submission, hear me clearly, is something that every believer is called to do to one another out of their reverence, love, respect for Christ, okay? So we see in these verses that the Spirit of God is the one who empowers us to do what's not normal to us, loving and submitting to others. And we should see verse 22, I submit, as a continuation of thought from verse 21 and not see the paragraph division. That's not how it was originally written, okay? It's just like they did that to organize your Bible. I don't know. So stupid people like me can understand it. But he didn't have a break in thought. Paul didn't have a break in thought. In the original Greek, it would have sounded more like this. All believers be filled with the Spirit, which means you submit to one another in reverence for Christ. Wives, do that to your husbands, also to the Lord. So he would have been like pointing up to the last thing he wrote, you know? And so it's only by being filled with the Spirit that we're empowered to do this. So let's define it. Women, we fear it means one thing. Men are kind of like, I hope it means this. But let's actually see biblical Greek scholars define this for us, okay? So submit could be defined like this: a voluntary attitude of coming under, cooperating, assuming responsibility, and carrying a burden, or to hold up. So the wise Bob I mentioned earlier, he says it like this, and I thought this was pretty good. When a wife is supposed to hold up her husband, she's supposed to be like steel. That's what we want to hold things up. Not jello, not weakness, but strength. She advances his authority with her authority. So think about it like this. If the man is the head, which we're going to see in verse 24, ladies, we've been neck down, man. Right? And if y'all see any like rolling heads out there, like really living it up and thriving in life, just like really let me know. Like message me. I would like to see that. But it ain't. And so let me just give you 3 things to clarify what submission is and what it is not. Notice Paul does not say, wives submit to every man. The husband is the head of the wife, not of all women. So it is not submission to every man, nor is it headship to every woman. The second thing, Paul knows a wife is to submit willingly to her husband, but nowhere does he say that the husbands are to demand submission from their wives, because they should not need to do so. Paul says the motive of godly, loving submission is as to the Lord. So wives are to submit to their own husbands as an expression of their submission to the Lord, and that he's commanded them to do so. And the reason we see in verse 22 for this command is the lordship of Christ. You show me a woman who's submitting to God in her life as the Lord of her life, and I will show you a woman who's able to submit to her husband. This does not mean she becomes a slave or that he's her boss, because her husband's also to submit to Christ. Third thing, wives are called to submit to a husband willing to die for her. I know that some of you may have a negative view of husband's authority, but a more accurate way of looking at it, at these marital roles, is to understand that wives are called to follow their husband's loving leadership. So there's 2 equal parts that need to be done here. I want to talk for a minute about the tension with submission. As I prepared to share this last week, I just felt a heaviness and a tension in my heart. Because even though, hopefully the past 2 weeks, you guys have been learning like God's actual intent. We've been uncovering like God's biblical, beautiful design for marriage, how a woman is not less, how like she doesn't become a slave to her husband. It's not forced submission. Even though I know the wonderful design that God has in submission for all believers to a loving Father, I couldn't help but wonder, Lord, how are some women who have known nothing but men who abuse, demean, devalue, take advantage of, use them as objects, how will women who have been nothing but harmed by men possibly going to hear this and understand it as beautiful? And Matt Chandler says it like this. It's a little harsh, so sorry. It's hard to be called into submission in a world full of little boys. It's hard to walk in submission when you're surrounded by herds of morons. Whoo, I'm sorry. He said that. And again, I'm telling you, dudes saying dudes to dudes, like, just, so we have to fix our eyes on Jesus. And men, that means you too. You have sisters out there that are hurting because they've just been hurt by little boys claiming to be submitting to God. And ladies, I just want to say sorry, like really sorry, if you've ever felt like owned or misused like an object, because your only owner is King Jesus, and he hates the way his daughters are being mistreated. I beg you guys to look at Jesus, please. He's written our faith. He's perfecting our faith. He is ruling right now on the throne. He is doing a work of healing, and he can do that in his time. And without Christ, like the crap you said last week, the crap before, it's not crap. That's just messed up. I just delete that out of the video. Can you? Anyway, it's not crap. But like without Christ, all of this unravels. Without Christ, men will not die to themselves, and women won't submit. So we know what wives are called to do, and I just recognize the tension in that. So I want us to keep moving through the text, and let's see how this unfolds and what else God has to show us. So verse 23, it says, "For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior." So my second point, she must be a woman who trusts God's design. So the first reason for a wife submitting in verse 22 was because of her devotion to Christ and her submission to the Lord's command. And now we learn the second reason the wife submits is because God has placed the husband as the head of the wife. To be clear, this isn't communicating a higher or lesser value, but rather a difference in role and responsibilities. Listen to this quote on Christ's headship of the church. "The church became the Messiah's bride, not by being dragged off unwillingly by force, but because he gave himself totally and utterly for her. There was nothing that love could do for the Messiah's people that he did not do. Although the crucifixion plays a central role in Paul's thought in almost every topic, nowhere else outside of this passage is it so lyrically described as an act of complete self-abounding love." A little cultural context for you. When Paul addresses the roles of family, he was speaking to the culture and the fact that he speaks of a wife willingly submitting and not by force, and the fact that he speaks of a husband willingly laying down his whole life in love and not out of duty, that was not culturally normal. But we look at the text, and in our context, we're like, submit, it's derogatory, it's weakness. And so God is trying to show the audience at that time and us now that his intended design for the role of the husband and the role of the wives is so much better because of the gospel. So even though culture changes, language changes, time, situation, we still have to live out this principle that God has shown us in his word, and it's better. It's a better design. And the way that we live this out, it will look very different from couple to couple. So I've heard this saying, I think a grandma made it up, I don't know, but it says, methods are many, principles are few, methods always change, principles never do. So the method by which this submission and this dying thing works out with husband and wife, it will look different, but the principle must stay. So for the wife, I lay down some things that I want in order that to help my husband be all that he can be. And for the husband, he surrenders things in his life and he sacrifices a lot of what he wants in order that I can be all that I can be for the purpose of the bigger goal, kind of like the basketball team. So in my marriage, like finances were like a huge thing. And I like freaking was like, oh, I want to spend, not save. And he's like, we're saving. I'm like, no. It literally, like, that's it. So welcome to our living room. But, well, we were engaged, so whatever. But we didn't live together. Woo. So that's a thing, whole different day. But okay. Anyway, so in this whole thing, I needed to surrender to like my junk and just because, well, God has given me a role to play, and he's given Brett the head of our family, And just to be honest, like, he's better. Like, Brett was better at that. Like, I stink. We'd be broke. So, it's just, but again, like, the methods will be different. Like, that's just our way of working it out. Like, Bob, who I've been mentioning, he's been married for 40 plus years, and his wife, Sandy, does their finances because she's better at it, and that's the way that she holds up their marriage. So the way it plays out looks different, but just a couple things to draw out from this. There are differences of role, but equal value and equal responsibility to both be for each other and for the Lord. So there's the times I've struggled most in my marriage. I might be for my husband, but I'm not really being for the Lord, which makes me, in return, like a really bad wife. So, like when I'm not having time with Christ daily, when I'm not reading his word, when I'm not growing, I'm not really a good wife, I'm not a good friend, like don't even talk to me kind of thing. Like I'm off. And so the second thing, in Genesis 1, we see some of this equality in value, right? We see like both male, female created both equally in the image of God. Okay, so one is not greater or lesser. And I mentioned earlier that the wife has a willing submission. That is because God has placed wives in a position of authority under their husbands as the head. And headship is not dictatorship. This term headship doesn't even necessitate leadership or authority always. So, in fact, more than anything, it was more of an indicator of the source of life to be given, right? Like, Jesus is the life giver to the church. Husbands ought to be giving life to their wives. And whether it's leadership or submission, it's costly. What Christ did for the church was costly, right? God's not asking us to do something he hasn't already done himself, both roles. So it's not unfair for Jesus to ask you to submit or to die to yourself because he perfectly submitted to the Father to the point of death on the cross, right? And the third thing, and I know like Skylar kind of pointed this out a couple weeks ago, he talked about the creation of women as the helper from Genesis 2. I just want to remind you this Hebrew word for helper, okay, in the Old Testament is Ezer. And that word is used 21 times in the Old Testament. It doesn't just describe women, it also describes God and the kind of help he is for his people. So certainly this does not mean that we are equivalent to God, so chill out, Beyonce, like calm it down, like no. But God has made us a helper to carry like equal authority, but to bring a distinct gift to the marriage. And so I thought this quote really wrapped up the part in Genesis when Eve, the first woman, is created. It said, "She was not made out of his head to rule over him, nor out of his feet to be trampled upon by him, but out of his side," right? His side, to be equal with him, under his arm to be protected, and near his heart to be beloved. So we know the what, the call for women, and we know why, because there's been some roles laid out for the headship for the husband. How does this all work together? So let's pick it up. In verse 24, it says this: "Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands." So my third final point is we must be men and women who center our marriages on the gospel. So we have this example here in this text of the church submitting to Christ, which is also the way wives should submit to their husbands. Submission is the proper response to divine designated authority in the church and Christ relationship and in the husband and wife relationship. So last week, Andrew showed you the kind of head Christ is to his church, how he laid down his life for her. He cleanses her. He presents her holy and blameless. Christ died for the church, for us, in the most beautiful display of our sinfulness and his saving grace. You know what the biggest problem in marriage is? It's a freebie, okay? I'll let you in on the secret. One sinner plus one sinner equals? Dude, crowd involvement, I love that, yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, I was really hoping you would get it. I know I'm not good at math, but so sin is the biggest problem in marriage. We know that now that the husband's placement is a divine placement as the head, but we know, and we can't forget this, ladies. I mean, I'm talking to myself, but we can't forget that he will fail to execute all of his responsibilities perfectly, since that would be impossible for anyone to do other than God. Yes, he's accountable to God for his responsibilities, but he will let you down. So, ladies, just hear me. I'm just talking to you. You're looking for something that doesn't exist. Superman doesn't exist. Actually, he does. His name is Jesus. He's the only one who'll never fail you, right? Some of you just need to hear that your husband's going to let you down. He will, because he's a sinner. And you need to die to some unrealistic expectations. I'm sorry to say, I think the world has sold you those. Probably on Instagram. I don't know. That thing is just so good and bad. It's like Ariana Grande, But mostly bad. Bad. Just bad. Bad. Hear me say it's bad, not good. I didn't say it's good. He said it's, I don't know. But, okay. The world tells us that we can have it all. The world has told us, ladies, you can have it all. You can't. Just trust on that. And guess what? You also will fail because, newsflash, you're a sinner too. What? Yeah, I know, it sucks, but we are. So, and I want you to see this, we have this amazing hope, and we have the ultimate solution to our biggest problem in marriage. It's the grace of Jesus. It really is. Because marriage is not primarily just this social event where we spend 30 grand and Pinterest pukes all over the place, No, marriage is rooted in the kingship, the lordship of Christ, the one who heals, redeems, restores, the one who's gracious with us. Oh, so gracious to me. And he's patient. And in this, we have great, great hope for marriage. Marriage is intended to point you to your Savior, Jesus. The purpose of the whole thing is the glory of Christ. So, yeah, finances, communication, personality differences, the past, and other things, those issues come up and they have to get worked through. But the biggest thing in marriage, and this can't be missed, it's not about you. It's about Jesus. I just want to, are you surrendered to, the lordship of Christ in your life? Is he ruling? Because your marriage won't be about you. It's about him. It's it still's about him. When you walk down the aisle, ladies, oh, it's about me. It's not. I know I had a moment and I was wow, I'm such a sinner still. What? I just wasn't trying to eat my cake and look pretty, but I know. And so if my husband and I miss this, our relationship is doomed. The beautiful relationship between Christ and the church that we see in this text is displayed to the world mainly through the husband and wife relationship, through our marriages. That's why we have to get this right, because the world is watching. I want to take just a minute to talk about the end of this verse. It says, in everything, right? It's whoa, for real? But what this means is everything between the wife and husband relationship. So Paul probably did not mean in absolutely everything. Hear me out, hear me why. Since the wife has a higher responsibility to obey and submit to the Lord. Let me be clear, ladies just getting married one day. The wife does not follow her husband in matters that are sinful, okay? When she encounters conflicting authorities between the Lord, her husband, the Lord through his word telling her to do one thing, and her husband telling her to do a contradictory thing, she obeys the Lord, okay? So it's not in everything. Yeah, Paul. Anyway, yeah, so how does this play out? What does this look like? I'm going to give you some just practical things. I might be kind of mean, so I'm cool, really. Okay, but the first thing, don't forget what I said earlier, verse 18. You cannot do this without the filling of the Holy Spirit. The only way is by both submitting to the lordship of God. Mutual submission on both parts. And no one really gets out of that. Like, no believer gets out of submission. No one really gets a better deal, right? But I'm going to pause here and just say my personal thing with it, okay? Is that cool? That's just my personal thing. That's not, Paul didn't say it. It's my personal thought, okay? So you can delete it from your mind after I say it. My personal thought, like, ladies, like, I'm just like, hey, we only got 3.5 verses, like 3.5. If you count 33, that says respect. That's hard for me to do. Oh, but it's good. It's good. It's good. We only have 3.5 verses, right? Like, I mean, I can memorize that, right? Like, so I kind of like my slice of the pie. Like, I'm sorry, dudes, I know you have like 7.5. Dude, that sucks. I'm just saying, like, I'm pretty cool with my slice of the pie. Like, I like my side of the deal. I'm not saying it's easier. I don't think it's easier. But, dude, you're going to die. Like, the dudes will die. The husbands will die. And there's certain ways submission feels like, all you ladies right now are like, I'd rather die than submit. Like, you're like, I hate this. Like, but I'm just saying, like, I kind of like my portion. I like that I don't have the responsibility of presenting my wife holy and blameless to the Lord. That's a lot. Like, I'm just saying, I kind of like, that's just a side thing. Like, that's not, Paul didn't say that. It's still hard. It is hard. It's like, it's so hard. But anyway, I'm okay with my responsibility and not my responsibility. So the second application, the wife and husband must submit to Christ, which basically what I said in the first thing, but a little extra, even before they're married, or else your marriage will begin on a weak foundation. Sins committed before marriage, they have a way of causing problems after marriage. Certainly, God is able to forgive, but there are really sad consequences, even to our forgiven sins. So let me just give you this warning. All your actions now, you bring that with you in marriage. So bring your junk now to God. Take that stuff and bring it, it's there. Bring it to God. Bring it to trusted women and men in your city group. Like, start to process and heal. I know it's like super vulnerable because you're basically saying, I'm not just sharing something I did struggle with. You might be sharing, I struggle with this today. I know. But you'll heal, man. You will heal before you meet the man or woman of your dreams. Heal now. So a couple questions with that. Does God need to do a work in you? Men, maybe you seen your father use submission and it was messed up. Or women, you just seen it as this weak, derogatory thing. I don't know, maybe it's something different that God needs to do a work in you. My point is let Jesus into those areas of your life and share and let Jesus just transform you now. Like, let that begin. Like, why wait? You know? Like, just let that begin now. I started to heal. You know, I'd walk through some just crap. Just like, that actually is the right definition of crap. I walked through it before I met Brett. I'm so glad. So glad. And just to, like, be clear, you won't be perfect. You're not going to be perfect when you hop into marriage. Oh, no, you will not be perfect. But you'll be pursuing health and healing. That's what I'm asking you to do. Also, I kind of feel like this next one is just like a 1 + 1 = 2. That's the only math I can do clearly. But I'm going to say it. So don't marry someone who isn't submitted to the lordship of Christ, if you are, because he or she will try to establish a home that disobeys God. That's just kind of like, get that. Third application, marriage, this is big, is making a covenant until you're in the ground. If you plan to marry a man that doesn't fit who Andrew described, just to be clear, you will be called to submit to him. Now, I'm not saying God would never call a woman to stay into an abusive relationship with a man that's sinning and biblically going against her. But if you're dating, I don't care if you're in a serious relationship right now, if you're engaged, if your wedding's tomorrow, like, if he's not who Andrew described, I just want to lovingly say, like, get out. Get out. I got out on one of those before. And the Lord really did a lot of stuff. It was amazing. Oh, I wouldn't even be standing here, you guys. You don't even understand. That just saved my life. Oh, just to drop that. But you can pray for that. my past. Okay, fourth thing. Fourth thing. Become this woman now. You can become this woman who's preparing to be a wife. And this is kind of the little trick with it. Submit to the Lord now, not just to get a husband. The goal is to be like Christ, not to be married. The goal in life is to be like Christ, not to be married. And I know how we work, chicks. I get it. I get it. Because I'm like, oh yeah, man, that girl she was talking, and I was like, I'm gonna go be a good Christian and become this godly woman, and then God's gonna give me a husband. I know that's what we do, but like that's not the goal. The goal is not to get a husband. So stop trying to be a wife. Start focusing on Christ. Like that's the challenge before you. Also, just like this is like maybe stop watching The Bachelor. Start reading your Bible. Like, I just think like. I know the pilot guy is up. I watched it. I just don't like me after I watch it. And I'm messed up. But like that was for me. So I should have went and I was going to go sit down and then say that because like I'm preaching to me and to you guys. But that show is just trash on trash on trash. It's trash being burned by a dude who's burning trash, who's just peeing on it, who's just puking on it. It's just so bad. Like, it's so bad for us. Oh, Jesus, save us, save us, save us. So, okay, that was like not in the flow here, but anyway. Also, like, as you submit to God, this happened to me. As you submit to God, He'll actually change what you're looking for. He'll start to change the kind of guy you're looking for. And you're probably looking, if He hasn't started to change yet, you got a low bar. Like, He will change it to so much better. Like, don't just look for, like, the frosting and sprinkles. That, like, a chick told me that once, and I was like, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But it was, like, so funny because it's so true. Like, the frosting and sprinkles, what I mean by that is, like, good looks, UNL football player. Oh, man. Money, like bulky, like athlete, stuff. Like, that's not bad. All I'm saying is it's called a cupcake, not a cup frosting sprinkles. So, like, if the foundation, like, tastes like crud, like, do you guys ever watch the baking shows? Like the cake's just, like, thick. You can't even pretend you like it. So, like, don't just go for that crap on top. Like, it's just extra. It's just like a bonus that I got a hot dude. You know what I'm saying? But his foundation is thick in the Lord. Like, woo. That is, you know what I mean? Like, anyway. Oh, God. He's submitting to God, okay? So, I just want to ask, like, how are you doing? How are you doing at submitting to the Lord right now? Like, in your singleness? Like, how are you doing with that? How are you growing into this woman right now? Like, as you're not married, do you surrender time? Are you going to go, like, give up your summer for the Lord? Like, that would show that maybe he's owning some things in your life. You're going to, like, say no to go hang out with those cool chicks because, like, they just don't have any truth to tell you. You're going to, like, lay down your life for the Lord. Let Him be the Lord of your finances, of your social life. Like, I just want to ask, like, how are you doing? Like, are you submitting to the Lord in areas of your life? So I just want to conclude with this. I know Andrew and Skylar have mentioned this, but in the next 10 years, a lot of you probably be married. Again, not the goal, but if Jesus doesn't, like, radically change our view of this, like, 50% of you will be divorced. That's just it. Like, that's where we're headed as a culture. And so we have to submit to King Jesus as the ruler of our lives so that He can change our view on this. We got some messed up views on this. A view that's been tainted by culture and, like, our sinful nature where the head takes advantage of the one submitting. And I just pray that we would be a people who know the deep sacrifice of Christ on that cross, and men, that you would die to yourselves so that the men in this world would be like, dude, like, how did you become a husband like that? Like, I want to be like that, right? And I pray that we'd be a people that would know the submission of Christ, that He fully submitted to the Father to the point of death. And that women, you would follow your husband, his leading, knowing that he's following God and he's submitting to the Lord. And that other women would be like, how do you be a wife like that? Like, that just looks so fun, like so effortless, like joyful. Like, can you imagine a world where like the people who are so wrapped up in culture like come to us, the church, and say like, how do we have what you have? How do we have that? We would give anything to have that. The world has bought a lie, and we must not buy it. Marriage must be what God designed it to be. He must be, guys. She must be, ladies, what God requires us to be. And maybe culture, they'll just totally miss it because they're freaking crazy. But if we want to thrive in this thing, and really in anything, like we have to do it on his terms, right? I'm going to pray.